Thank you, Damodar Priya Mataji, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here with all of you. Can you hear me all right? Yes, good.
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
So first, congratulations to you for completing, as I understand, the Bhagavad Gita study. So I'm reminded of so many years ago when I did Bhakti Śāstrī. It was a much simpler program than you have. I believe you have several exams and also writing assignments, isn't it?
Yes, they had 3 exams for each of the 3 parts of the Bhagavad Gita, and essays to write also, and many shlokas to memorize.
Yeah. We also had shlokas to memorize, but we had no essays, and we had, for the entire Bhakti Śāstrī, we had one exam. One single exam.
Okay. It's a bit
and the way I did the course was simply self-study. And then I took the exam. This is how, at the time, Brajabihari Prabhu in Vrindavan suggested I could do it. So, anyway, that was many long years ago. So now we are venturing into Isopanisad, and I'm thinking rather than I'll give some attention to Srila Prabhupada's translations, perhaps purports, but very minimal. Because I thought you will be giving attention to Srila Prabhupada's presentation of the Isopanisad. So rather than doing that, I want to give some attention to some of the other commentators, which fortunately we have translations by His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj. It's a small book that he published some time ago, and I went through that to some extent, and I thought we could see some interesting features. But more broadly, let me now come to my notes. We may, let me start with some pranati. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We can first ask ourselves and reflect on why do we study Śrī Īśopaniṣad as part of the Bhakti Śāstrī program. And I have a couple of 2 or 3 reasons. One is Srila Prabhupada wanted it. Srila Prabhupada translated it quite early. He had translated Bhagavad Gita, I believe, before Isopanisad. He translated Bhagavad Gita twice. His manuscript for the Gita was stolen. He had exactly 1 copy of it, and it somehow disappeared. So he started over. Isopanisad, fortunately, was not lost. And I believe he included it in a list of books to be studied for Bhakti Śāstrī. Is that correct, Damodar Priya?
Yes.
He specified.
I understand, yes.
Yeah. It was, I can say for myself, one of the first books I read, and it was one of the first books available, maybe it was the first book, in German language. And it was, I believe it was the first book that we distributed in Germany. I joined the devotees in Germany, and we had Deutsche Isopanisad, and then later in Holland, in Nederland, it was the first book, as far as I remember, in Dutch language, so I was also distributing it there. It is an Upanishad, and we'll discuss a bit about the Upanishads in a moment. One significance of this is it is considered to be Shruti. As you may know, there is Shruti, there is Smriti, as 2 sort of broad divisions of what we generally call Vedic literature. Scholars would, typically scholars will not be happy when we include Smriti as Vedic literature. They will say, no, Veda means the 4 Vedas and the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas and the Upanishads, and that's it. Everything else, they will say, is post-Vedic. Srila Prabhupada used the term Vedic in different ways, but generally he used it in the broad sense, in an inclusive sense. But here it's significant that the Upanishads, a particular, we can say, genre of Vedic literature, is counted from the narrower definition of Veda. It is counted as Veda. It is counted as Shruti. And this becomes significant in the philosophical branch of Indian philosophy, Vedanta. As you may know, there are, since around the 14th or 15th century, there are considered to be 6 major darshanas, or systems of philosophy. And one of them is Vedanta. And Vedanta is based on three sort of categories of literature that are considered authoritative. The first of these is Shruti, and then there is Smriti, and there is what is called Nyaya. And each of these is considered a foundation, a prasthana. So you have Shruti prasthana, Nyaya prasthana, and Smriti prasthana as the three sort of pillars, or sort of like a tripod. As you may know, whenever you set up a camera on a tripod, you just need a tripod. You don't want 4 legs, you want 3, because 3 you can set on any surface. It doesn't have to be an even surface. It'll go nicely. So the prasthana traya, the threefold foundation or tripod of Vedantic, we can say Vedantic discourse, consists of these 3 elements. Shruti in particular refers to a certain group of Upanishads, not all of the Upanishads, but around 10 to 12 Upanishads are used, are quoted. And then one of them is the Isopanisad, Isopanisad or Īśopaniṣad. And just to sort of complete the picture, Nyaya Prasthana refers to one text, and that is the Vedanta Sutra, also known as the Brahma Sutra or Sutras. And the Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra is itself referring to these Upanishads in the Shruti Prasthana. And then Smriti Prasthana refers in particular to Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita is sometimes called Gitopanishad. This may be a later designation, but it's identified in some respects as being also an Upanishad. It's also because the Bhagavad Gita has some verses which are very much echoes of specific verses in the Upanishads, especially we find in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita some verses that are almost exactly the same in the Katha Upanishad. Those are the ones I'm aware of. There could well be others, but especially in the early part of the 2nd chapter, we have these sort of echoes of Katha Upanishad. Another reason for studying or a related reason for studying the Īśopaniṣad is we could call it a text of early personalism. And what I mean by that is that the Upanishads as a whole, it's safe to say they are quite, I don't want to say impersonal, but non-personal in character. And I can say that with confidence because even a very fierce personalist scholar of the Madhva Sampradaya, whom I met some years ago. He visited us in Oxford, and I took him on a little tour of Oxford University, and we were chatting together. And he said, it's really a fact. We have to admit the Upanishads are really quite Advaitic. They're very non-personal. He said it to me almost like in confidence, because being a Madhva person himself, growing up in a Madhva family, they're very, they're kind of the most hardcore anti-Advaita Vedanta people. And here he was kind of admitting, well, yeah, let's face it, it's very impersonal. But the Isopanisad shows significant personalism, if you like, as does one of the other major Upanishads, and that's the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which sometimes Srila Prabhupada quotes, and Vaishnavas in general like to quote. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad is very personalistic, and generally people say it is showing or speaking about and glorifying Lord Shiva as opposed to Lord Vishnu. But that seems to be a matter of debate. It, I believe, uses the term Maheshvara and so on, which is usually associated with Shiva. But in any case, the point is these two Upanishads have distinctively personalist characteristics. Having said that, the Isopanisad, I don't know, maybe also Shvetashvara, there is a commentary by Shankaracharya, the sort of foundational acharya of Advaitavada. We may get back to that, but okay, another reason for us to study the Isopanisad in the Bhakti Śāstrī course, I would say, is because Srila Prabhupada's purports to these 18 verses plus an invocation are kind of are setting out a kind of short manifesto of what is Krishna conscious theology, what is Krishna conscious philosophy. It's very much Srila Prabhupada, which is to say he explains philosophical points, elaborating in ways which you don't find other commentators doing. And that, incidentally, is a question which perhaps someone will research someday, and that is to what extent, if at all, did Srila Prabhupada refer to previous Vaishnava commentaries. But that's not something that we need to be so much concerned about, I would say. Okay, so why study Isopanisad? Well, it's an Upanishad. It's early personalism. And also, I should say, it's very manageable. It's one of the shortest Upanishads. It's only 8, as I said, 18 verses plus this invocation, which technically is not part of the Upanishad. And with Prabhupada's purports, we get a kind of manifesto. Many of the points, I'm guessing we could say all of the points that Srila Prabhupada makes in his purports to Isopanisad, he will also make in his other writings in the Bhagavad Gita. So, in a sense, what you read in his purports in Isopanisad, you will probably feel like, yes, I know this already. But it's good to see how he's presenting and representing, if you like. Okay, a little more about the Upanishads. I should say maybe now that I made some notes in 3 parts. The first part is getting a bit of historical and textual context of the Isopanisad. So we'll talk a bit about the Upanishads in general. Second area is something about structure and the content or contents of the Isopanisad. And we'll see how the time goes. The third section, I thought we can focus possibly on some of the verses. And as I mentioned, there are these different commentaries, and we might just for curiosity, you could say, we could draw out a few points, sort of randomly from those. Okay, so historical and textual context of the Isopanisad. I mentioned Shruti versus Smriti. We have this other distinction, Karma Kanda versus Jnana Kanda or Jnana Kanda. In North India, Jnana is pronounced Jnana, where the 4 Vedic Samhitas, Rig, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva, are generally classified as Karma Kanda, or the section focused on ritual action or related to ritual action. And Jnana Kanda or Jnana Kanda is, as one might guess, focused on jnana, on understandings and realizing spirit. The Upanishads are very much in the category of Jnana Kanda, and the general mood of the Upanishads, you could say, is reflective, and some would say speculative, which is to say focusing on what we might want to call the bigger questions. Most sort of fundamentally and most repeatedly, we could say, the Upanishads are interested to understand 2 terms. One is Atman or Atma, the self, and the other is Brahman. And again, from a sort of non-dual perspective, there's greater or lesser expressions or stronger or lesser strong identification of these 2. Atman is Brahman, of course, for the Advaitins, for Shankaracharya. there is simply no difference. There is Atman and Brahman, and to realize that they are one and the same is for him the whole the whole purpose of the game, if you like, called Vedanta. Scholars make distinctions between early and later Upanishads, and the almost, I think, without exception, they identify what is the largest Upanishad, the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, as the earliest. The scholars like to assign dates to the Upanishads, so they will say the Brihad Aranyaka is possibly composed around the 8th or 7th century before the Common Era. And then following the Brihad Aranyaka is the Chandogya Upanishad, the Kaushitaki Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad, and the Aitareya Upanishad. And then I mentioned the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. This is invariably considered to be a later Upanishad for two reasons. Together with the Isopanisad, the Sanskrit style is somewhat different. The Isopanisad is in verse form, whereas these early Upanishads are prose. They're just like we write sentences, so they are composed as sentences. The Katha Upanishad is also in verse form, and it's also later. The Kena Upanishad is also considered later. A little definition here of Veda. Vedayati dharmang brahma cha Vedaha. Scripture that teaches about Dharma and Brahman is Veda. So from that definition, we could take that as justification for a broader understanding, which, as I mentioned, Srila Prabhupada often would make of Veda. But if we go back to the more narrow definition, and we look at the Vedic Samhitas, the Rig, Sama, Yajur, Atharva, they are composed of mantra, first of all. The sort of minimal unit of these Samhitas is the mantra, and then so many mantras together become a sukta. A sukta is a hymn, we might say, and it comes from su ukta, which means well spoken. The Vedic seekers were very eager to speak well, and much of what we find in the Rig Veda is just expressing this concern to that the priests or the poets, this composers of the Veda are speaking well. And then so many suktas together becomes a samhita. So the Rig Veda is how many? 1028, I think, suktas or hymns. Then there are the Brahmanas, and this is always confusing because Brahmana refers to particular genre of Sanskrit literature. At the same time, it refers to a certain class of people, the priests, the brahmanas. And then there's Brahman, the understanding of the absolute reality. And it can be a bit more complicated than that, because a Brahman can also be a prayer. But here we're just to mention there's the Samhitas, and then come the Brahmanas. These are texts which focus more on ritual and how ritual sacrifices are performed. And some of them have very intriguing stories to explain why it is that certain rituals are performed. Names of the Brahmanas, I know of two of them right now. There's the Shatapatha Brahmana, and there's a Taittiriya Brahmana. There are others. I think there's an Aitareya Brahmana also. Then there are another category, the Aranyakas. And the Aranyakas are similar to the Brahmanas. They discuss about rituals, but they're associated more with the forest. They are forest texts. Aranya means forest. And therefore, they are a kind of bridge. They're similar to the Brahmanas, but then again, they also have characteristics like the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are sort of the fourth of these in this series, the Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. And they're all identified as Veda. And particular Brahmanas and particular Aranyakas and particular Upanishads are identified with or associated with certain samhita. So the Isopanisad, if I remember correctly, it's associated with the Yajurveda, which is Yajurveda is in two parts, Shukla and Krishna, and it's associated with one of those two, which I don't remember which. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's associated with the Shukla, the white Yajurveda. And you can impress your friends. You can tell them the Īśopaniṣad is also known as the Vajrasaneyi Samhita Upanishad. Vajrasaneyi. Okay. And here's another detail which you don't need to worry about. There are two recensions of the Īśopaniṣad. What does that mean, recension? It means version. Down through time have rescended, have come down two different versions of the Īśopaniṣad. And they're practically the same. I believe it's just one verse or one line in one verse, which are a little different. The Īśopaniṣad or Īśopaniṣad is called the Īśopaniṣad because of the first verse, the first word of the first verse. Isha vasyam idam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. So Isha avasyam. The same is true for the Katha Upanishad, I believe, and the Kena Upanishad. They just, the first word of the Katha Upanishad is Katha, and the first word of the Kena Upanishad is Kena. So they become known by those first words. I mentioned commentaries, so Bhanu Swami has given us translations of 1, 2, 3, 4 commentaries, namely that of Madhvacharya, of Vedanta Deshika. Vedanta Deshika is a very important person, devotee of the Śrī Vaishnava Sampradaya after Ramanuja, maybe 200 years after. Then we have coming sort of closer to our Gaudiya Vaishnava home, we have a commentary of Baladev Vidyabhushana, and we have a commentary of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. As I mentioned, there's also a commentary by Shankaracharya, but we won't worry about him this time. Now, the Upanishads in general are, some of them are quite intriguing in that they include stories about how instruction was given. But the Isopanisad doesn't give us that. It's, as we know, it's very short with 18 verses, and we don't know who is speaking to whom. In the last 4 verses, we get what are essentially prayers, and they are addressed to the Lord and according to one or two of the commentators, partially to the mind. But otherwise, we don't have any sense of the instructions of the context. However, I thought it's interesting to note that Madhvacharya writes in his commentary to verse 1 that the mantras of the Isopanisad were chanted by Swayambhuva Manu in praise of Yajna, who is, if I understood it correctly, Swayambhuva Manu's grandson. And Madhvacharya is supporting his claim by quoting from the Brahmanda Purana. Also, mantras are understood to be revealed by rishis. So who is the rishi revealing? Well, according to Baladev Vidyabhushana, the rishi who is the revealer of the Isopanisad mantras is someone named Dadyan Atarvana. Dadyan Atarvana. Who is Dadyan Atarvana? Well, he's the son of Atarvana. So there's Dadyan Atarvana, and there's his father, who was Atarvana. And the story is that when Dadyan Atarvana approached his father to know the truth, the ultimate truth, his father, Atarvana, spoke this Upanishad. So there you go. There are quite many curious names of sages and others in other Upanishads, but that's what we have about the Isopanisad as in terms of context. Maybe I should stop here briefly and see if there are any questions so far. Premavan Hari.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I wanted to ask regarding the personalistic text. You said that the two Upanishads were on the later part of the Upanishads were personalistic, but I'm wondering when do these historians, um, so which is the first personalistic text that historians recognize, let's say?
Yeah, good question. As far as I remember, it's one of these two, the Isopanisad or the Śvētāśvatara Upanishad, but I don't remember if they specify one over the other. And they will generally be the first to admit that it's all very much guesswork. These texts don't have any dates on them, unlike the Chinese, who were, to a large extent, very interested to date everything. In India, they didn't seem to be so concerned about that. So, as I understand, essentially, they, in terms of the Upanishads at least, they will say these are personalists. Now, you can argue that in the Rig Veda there's so much personalism. There's there for the most part prayers which are addressed to divinities, and they're very much about invoking those divinities and praising them so that they will be pleased, and by hopefully pleasing them, they will give benedictions. That's, you could say, the general motivation, and you could say, and so you can find indications of what we would now call bhakti in the Rig Veda. But it's very much implicit, whereas it becomes much more explicit when it becomes completely explicit when we get to the Bhagavad Gita and the Śrīmad Bhagavatam, and then later Puranas. I might mention Upanishads. There are different lists of Upanishads, and what I was saying about connection to Vedanta, it's just a handful. It's like 10 or 12 that are considered authoritative, but there are lists of Upanishads of 108 or 216, and so there are so many Upanishads, but the vast majority of these are considered to have been composed later, some of them much later, some of them possibly in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. Yeah, so there's the Kali Santarana Upanishad, which is very short, which Gaudiya Vaishnavas we like to quote because it has the Hare Krishna mantra in it. When was it composed? Well, you can join in the guessing game, but I think some will say 15th or even 16th century. 15th, I don't remember exactly. The Brahma Sutra or Vedanta Sutra is usually dated to quite late, like the 5th century of the Common Era. I'm giving you here what we might want to call mundane scholars' estimations, And traditional scholars will vigorously reject these estimations for the most part. And as we know, Srila Prabhupada didn't give much value at all, if any, to the estimates, these dating estimates of scholars. But I think it's useful to be aware of them. One reason being you might meet such a scholar, and unless you're at least basically aware of this, you may, when you speak to them, appear to them as extremely foolish. So anyway, it's, I think, just good to be aware of these guesstimates, estimated times. Is that okay?
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we? Yes, Amadapri.
Maharaj, thank you so much for this explanation so far. I was actually thinking that the Upanishad texts were basically wisdom texts spoken from the guru to the disciple. But now you mentioned that mainly two of them are personalized and the others impersonal. So that understanding is then not quite correct. It's not primarily wisdom texts which are in from person to person.
No, you're correct. They are. Of course, what you're suggesting is they're all personal because they are communications between persons, between a guru and a disciple. And that's a good point. And at the same time, what you find is the content of what they're teaching, for the most part, is something that we might consider impersonal. That this ultimate reality, which is to be realized, this Brahman, is somehow beyond or non-personal or impersonal. So a famous story of guru and disciple is in the Katha Upanishad when Nachiketas approaches Yamaraj. He has three benedictions from him, and that's a story we won't go into. And taking his third benediction, Nachiketas asks, so what happens after death? Is anything surviving after death? And initially, Yamaraja does not want to answer. And that's another kind of theme or trope of the Upanishads, is a kind of resistance. You have to be qualified to hear, and to prove your qualification can be a challenge. The Chandogya is perhaps most famously giving this impersonal understanding. It's what is it? Uddalaka and his son, and it's there in chapter 6 of the Chandogya that he speaks repeatedly this phrase, Tat Tam Asi, you are that, after giving many, many different sort of physical analogies, examples of how to understand Brahman. He concludes each line with Tat Tam Asi, you are that. But you make a good point. There's, it's personal from the get-go, if you like, just recognizing that it's a teacher person teaching a student person. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yes. Deva Shri Radhika.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for this introduction to Isopanisad. I had two questions. One is relating to the fact that you had also highlighted how Isopanisad, Srila Prabhupada does not give very in-depth analysis in a way that it's something that we can also find in the Bhagavad Gita, the purports there. And one observation I had is that throughout the Isopanisad text, Srila Prabhupada refers to the Bhagavad Gita, but not so much maybe to Srimad Bhagavatam or other more transcendental, or not more, but other transcendental literature. Maybe sometimes Brahma Samhita and other Upanishads. And I was thinking that, because I was also referring to the Isopanisad Shubodhini by Gauranga Darshan Prabhu. And in that he elaborates how Ishopanishad, it kind of defines further on the five tattvas. And then, is there a reason why Srila Prabhupada kept such a simple approach to Ishopanishad? That's my first question. And the second question is that in the introduction to Śrī Īśopaniṣad, despite the fact that it talks about such transcendental topics like Ishvara and Prakriti and how to lead life keeping Ishvara as goal. But in the introduction, Srila Prabhupada says that our real identification is Varnashrama. And I found it quite striking to to have that stated as the introduction to Ishopanishad. So if you may have some thoughts on this. Thank you.
Okay, the first point, remind me again, was our
that
question.
Srila Prabhupada kept the purport very rather simple, as you had also mentioned.
Focus.
Something,
Yeah.
and details, yes.
Well, he has fairly long purports, actually. I don't know about simplicity or complexity or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what his thought is. My general sense is just that he wanted to make. I think he recognized that in the West, in English, people have heard of the Upanishads, and so, in effect, he's saying, "Well, here you go. Here's the Isopanishad, and just see how." Personal it is, in a sense, to head off the attention that might go to so many other Upanishads with their impersonal orientations. And he wrote his commentary, as he wrote all his commentaries, with an aim to be accessible as widely as possible. So there's considerable overlap. The introduction, as I remember now, I just glanced at it, is taken from a speech that he gave, wasn't it? Yeah. And he's giving sort of a basic step one in understanding what is the value of Veda. Recognize that there is something called Vedic authority, and it's superior to our human imperfections, like that. Yeah. And then the second question was?
I found it striking that Srila Prabhupada in this introduction lecture, he mentions our real identification is Varnashrama.
Oh yeah, with Varnashrama. Yeah, that's interesting. So many times Srila Prabhupada expressed in different ways that human civilization sort of begins with Varnashrama. And, he was he was observing how things are going in the modern world, and you could say bemoaning the loss of what he saw as basic principles. So he would sometimes put in the very beginning of something, let's get real, let's start with basics. And what is the basic starting point? It's Varna Ashrama, I would say, like that. Yeah. Okay, let's dip a little into some of the verses and commentary. Let me see. Verse number 1. Well, perhaps a good point to make, and sort of tying in with just this point of what is Srila Prabhupada emphasizing. One could perhaps do a research to see numbers, but it seems to me that verse 1 is very much quoted by Srila Prabhupada in other contexts, in lectures, and perhaps also in other purports. Isha vasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita ma grida kasya svidanam. He would often tie this in with the idea of the peace formula, with the idea of spiritual economics, and so on. I wanted to just point out a little contrast. Let's see, we can read. Can someone, one of you, read Srila Prabhupada's translation to Mantra 1?
I have it, I could read it here.
Yes, please.
So, translation to Mantra 1. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong.
I like that phrase Prabhupada has added, knowing well to whom they belong. So now, just as a contrast, and this is Bhanu Swami's translation of Madhvacharya's, perhaps using his commentary to translate. He says, the entire universe, whatever exists in Prakriti, is pervaded by the Lord. Isha avasyam. Enjoy what is given by the Lord. Bunjita is, I guess, an imperative. Enjoy what is given by the Lord, but do not desire the wealth of others. Ma grida kasya svit dhanam. The dhanam means wealth, and kasya svit he's taking as the of others, of another. And then another translation from Vedanta Deshika, and this is rather different. The Lord is inside and outside of everything in this world and beyond. Therefore, experience the objects of the world with a sense of detachment, since nothing belongs to oneself. Do not desire anyone else's wealth. So, of course, we can say these are maybe worded differently, but the message is the same. Let's go to, Vedanta Deshika has quite a long commentary to this. Then Baladevidya Bhushana. I'm sorry I don't have these sort of for you to also read. But anyway, here is Baladevidya Bhushana. This visible world and whatever exists beyond perception is under the control of the Lord. Because of this, you should enjoy only what is allotted to you by the Lord through karma. Do not hanker for more than that. Whose property is it? So that is interesting because it takes kasya as it's actually a question word. Whose? And so it's we may want to say a rhetorical question. Whose property is it? Well, it's the Lord's property, Isha. And from his commentary, I just thought there's an interesting detail. He says the word Isha comes from the noun eat. Eat. It comes from the noun eat, meaning ruler or controller, derived from the verb ish. It can be derived by adding the ending according to the rule kvip cha. This is from Panini 3.276. So you see it can get quite technical. And Panini is the famous grammarian who composed the Ashtadhyayi, which is considered the standard of Sanskrit grammar. In the instrumental case, it becomes Isha, by the controller, in relation to the verb form Vasyam. In the context, it means he controls all the living entities or the Supreme Lord. And he goes on to say, he controls them all because he is the very essence of all living beings, Atmatva. Idam Sarvam refers to the whole of the real, visible material world. The whole material realm is covered by, that is, Vasyam, the Lord. Ooh, I better turn this off. Keeps going. Okay. Covered by Vasyam, the Lord. Vasyam means capable of being covered. From the root vas. Vas becomes Vasya by the rule, and then there's a rule, and Ralur Nyat. The ending Nya is added after a verb that ends in R. Oh, that gets too technical. Thus, the meaning is this world should be covered by the Lord. The world must be pervaded by the Supreme Lord in order to function. And then he quotes something from Shruti, from Mahanarayana Upanishad. Narayana is the beginning and the end, within and outside everything. So anyway, all I want to call attention to here is there's a lot in each one of these mantras. It's only 18 mantras, but each one contains or can be taken in a variety of ways, which may, you could say, have the same essential meaning, but may have subtle variations of understanding which enrich our understanding. So you might not necessarily in your course the Bhakti Śāstrī, but at some point you may want to come back and study these commentaries to the Isopanisad. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's translation to number 1. Whatever exists in this universe is all covered by the Lord. Because of this, you should enjoy along with the practice of renunciation. You should not hanker after the wealth of others. Verse 2, I just wanted to note, let's see, 2 different interpretations of Atmahana. Kurvan, is this number 2? Kurvan eveha karmani jijiva shakshitam. Evam tvai nanyate tosi not karma lapita. Sorry, no, should be verse 3. Asurya, I believe. Okay. Yes, Asurya namate loka andena tamasavrita tangs te pretya vigachanti yeke chatma hanojana. So Madhvacharya interprets, I'll read his translation, the planets attained by the demons, full of misery, are certainly covered with deep darkness. Andena tamasa avrita. Those who defame the true nature of Vishnu enter those planets after death. So he's taking the word Atma as referring to Vishnu. On the other hand, Vedanta Deshika says, after death, those who do not cultivate knowledge of the soul immediately enter the planets covered with intense darkness, where the demonic dwell. So he's taking Atma as the soul, the self. And there I just wanted to point out, as I remember, Prabhupada also takes it as the soul, the self, just to point out that the way Sanskrit works, there can be a variety of interpretations. Okay, let's see. There's one verse. This is it verse 4? No, not verse 4. It is. Okay. One general point I wanted to call attention to from verse 5. Tad ejati, tan naijati, tat dure, tat vantike, tat antarasya sarvasya, tat u sarvasyasya bhahyata. And here I'll just read Madhvacharya's translation. Well, no, let's first hear Prabhupada's translation. Devashri Radhika, do you have it there?
Yes, Maharaj, I'll just get to it.
You can also have a screen share, Maharaj, if you like.
if she has it there.
Mantra 4. Sorry, I lost
5.
5. Yes. Yes. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but he is very near as well. He is within everything, and yet he is outside of everything.
And here's a striking different translation. Madhvacharya says, others fear the Lord, but the Lord fears no one. He is far away, but close. He is inside everything and outside everything. But the Vedanta Deshika, the entity, that entity moves but does not move. It is very far away, but also close. It is within everything and also outside everything. The point I want to make here is this is a common feature in Upanishadic language, broadly speaking, and it comes up in the Upanishad, in the Isopanisad, is where you get these contrary ideas juxtaposed. He is near, he is far. He runs, but he doesn't move, and so on. And this might remind us of, I'm thinking of these, what are they called? Koans of the Zen Buddhist tradition, where you get some contradictory statement. You know, the sound of one hand clapping is the famous one, which has the purpose, the function of forcing one out of the mind, out of the normal way of reasoning, of thinking. It's a kind of technique that is, we might say, a psychological technique that's putting oneself in a position where the mind cannot grasp. And so in order to grasp, one has to go outside the mind. But as we'll see in the Isopanisad, at the end, the emphasis is on prayer, and the prayer is essentially for divine grace. And the divine grace wanted is that one can realize, one can understand, one can have darshan of the Lord, to actually directly perceive the Lord. Okay. Now jumping to verse number 7. Can we hear the Prabhupada's translation of verse 7, please?
Mantra 7. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks, in quality one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him?
So one point here to note is again the rhetorical question at the end. What can be illusion or anxiety for him? What indeed? Tatra ko mohaka shoka. Kaha is the question word. And moha, what's the question of bewilderment, moha, and what's the question of shoka, of lamentation or remorse? So I've just marked something in Vedanta Deshika's commentary to this. In his translation, he says, what lamentation or illusion can exist for that person who sees the Lord pervading everything? who at the time of meditation realizes all beings as parts of the one Lord. So he has a different way of phrasing it, which is nice. In his commentary, he says, that person who sees the one Lord pervading all things, ekatvamanupashyata, suffers no lamentation, shoka, from death of a son or loss of a kingdom, because he has attained complete lack of possessiveness for all things in this world, since he understands that everything is part of the Lord. So he specifies two things that normally one would lament the loss of very much, the loss of a son or of a kingdom. And then he quotes to support that, and this is a typical way of, in commentary, is to make a statement and then support it with some quote from Shastra. This now comes from Mahabharata. Detached Janaka said, "My treasures are unlimited, but nothing belongs to me. If the whole of Mithila were burnt down, still nothing of mine is burnt." And he goes on to say, the word oneness, ekatvam, does not mean only one entity and nothing else, but rather one entity with everything else as its attributes, because there is no statement in this work which negates the statement in the first verse, everything is pervaded by the Lord, quote unquote. Everything, including this material world, is also real. And it would be impossible to begin teaching about such absolute oneness, since a person would have to admit duality in the form of knowledge and ignorance concerning the falsity of all experience, even to begin teaching. Very interesting argument he makes. That's Vedanta Deshika, the Śrī Vaishnava. You could say commenting in a sort of typical Śrī Vaishnava way. Now, Mantra 8 has as its last line a very long line which doesn't really seem to fit the meter, and one wonders, how is this? Saparyagachukam makayam avrinam ashnaviram shudham apapavidham kavir manishi paribhusvayampur yatat yatato, and it's really hard to pronounce, yatat yatator tam vyadadachas fatibhya samabhyaha. How did that happen? I think this is the line which is slightly different in two different recensions. But let's see, I marked something in a footnote that Bhanu Swami gives. Yeah, one of the characteristics listed here of the Lord is that he is without grief. And he explains, the Lord is without grief because he is perfect, without a gross and subtle body. He is without sin because he is pure. But can a bodiless person create a universe? To remove this doubt, the next line indicates the Lord still has qualities in a spiritual body. Thus, He is described as omniscient, the controller of the mind, the best, and independent. Finally, he is described as creating a real world as it was before eternally. So that's what the last line is giving. He is creating a real world which existed before eternally. Yatat 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 tat yato artan vyadadat chasvadivya samavya. We could, of course, spend more time on each of these, but you'll be studying them carefully with Srila Prabhupada's purports. I think I'll jump now to verse mantra 15, which also Srila Prabhupada emphasized very much. Can we hear Prabhupada's translation to mantra 15? Hiranmayena patrena.
O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee.
Madhvacharya's translation is, O Vishnu, your form is covered by the brilliant sun. Please remove the covering so that your devotee can see the form. Now, in the verse, the person addressed is referred to as Pushan. And Pushan is here translated as Vishnu. Srila Prabhupada translates as, O Lord. And also Vedanta Deshika as Lord, Baladev. But Pushan can also refer to a Devata referred to in the Rig Veda as a separate divinity, a kind of obscure divinity. But Pushan can also mean the nourisher. O you who nourish. But I just wanted to call attention to this verse as being one that Srila Prabhupada emphasizes very much. And here is a point from Baladev Vidyabhushana about this verse. He says, after the Guru delineates the form of Paramatma to the qualified disciple, the disciple engages in selfless worship of the Lord to meet the Lord directly and then attains a liberated state. This has been described in the previous verses, but meeting the Lord directly is not possible just by Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, etc. These three, Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, are kind of the formula, the standard formula in Vedantic discourse. How do you realize Brahman? You first hear, and then you reflect on, and then you nididhyasana, you meditate on, you digest, and then you realize. And here, Baladev is saying that's not enough. Liberation, he goes on, is not possible just by meeting the Lord. Only when one attains the mercy of the Lord can one attain the Lord. The concluding verses of the Upanishad show the method of praying for the Lord's mercy so that one may attain perception of the Lord through hearing and meditation, and so that one may attain liberation from the world through perceiving him. So this verse 15 is the first of the final verses, the 4 verses, which are in the form of prayers. And in this first prayer, he's saying, please reveal yourself. Your effulgence is obscuring your form, and I want to see that form. And Baladeva is saying, yes, that's there, and there is need of prayer in order for that form to be fully revealed. Again, in Mantra 16, Pushan is addressed. Pushan ekarshe yamasurya prajapatya yuhar rashmin samuhatejo yatte rupam kalyanatamam tate pashami yo sav asau purushasoham asmi. And there we have Madhvacharya referring to Pushan as O nourisher. Let's see, I think I just marked one more thing here. In 16, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's translation to 16, O Pushan, Ekarshe, Surya, Prajapatya, remove your rays, restrict your light, then I can see your most auspicious form. I am qualified to see that form because you, the complete person, and Paramatma, your portion in the material world, and we jivas also are all spiritual by nature. If you are merciful, I can see you. So that's interesting. I think that he's highlighting the notion, I'm qualified to receive your mercy. Why? Because I'm the same nature as you. Okay, then 17 is, yes, in 17 we get this interesting repetition. Vayur anilam amritam atedam pasmantam shariram Om kratos smara kritang smara kratos smara kritang smara. 4 times smara, which is the imperative form, remember, and krata is twice and kritam is twice. So it's a repetition for emphasis. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, okay, just possible interest. There's a note to the commentary. Kratu means determination. Determination. It also refers to a sacrifice and deity of sacrifice. Vishnu, a deity of sacrifice, namely Vishnu. Madhva takes that meaning. In Baladeva's and Shankara's explanations, the first command to remember seems to be addressed to the mind. The second command to remember is addressed to the Lord. In Shankara's explanation, which is very similar to Baladeva's, this is made clear since the word Agne, O fire, Brahman, is added to explain the second utterance of smara. Okay, I just thought that's interesting. So it's kind of pleading, smara, remember. What is to be remembered? My activities, what I've done, krita, what I have done for you, for the Lord. But also, it means, according to these commentaries, let myself remember what I've done. And then the final verse is a prayer again, Agne, addressing Agni, which means, in this case, the Lord, who is fire. Naya supata raye asman vishvani deva vayunani vidvan yud yasmad juhuranam eno bhuishtam te nama ukting videma. Let's hear Srila Prabhupada's translation to verse 18.
O my Lord, as powerful as fire, O omnipotent one, now I offer you all obeisances, falling on the ground at your feet. O my Lord, please lead me on the right path to reach you. And since you know all that I have done in the past, please free me from the reactions to my past sins so that there will be no hindrance to my progress.
Yes. So he takes Agne as, O Lord, powerful as fire. This is often Srila Prabhupada is, in a sense, weaving commentary into his translation. Because the Sanskrit says Agne, O Agni, he's saying, yes, it's the Lord who is powerful as fire. Vedanta Deshika translates, O leader of all beings, for Agne. No, sorry, correction. I think he's translating Naya as leader of all beings, performer of pastimes. Okay, and then a footnote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's. Bhaktivinoda Thakur translates simply, O Agni, purifier, guide us on the right path to the highest spiritual treasure. O Lord, since you understand our extent of knowledge of the world and consequent detachment from it, knowledge of God and devotion, please lead us there. Destroy our obstructing sins. We repeatedly offer you respects. In a footnote here we have Bhaktivinoda mentions Vishvajnana as the first knowledge, followed by Ishvarajnana or Vijnana, followed by Bhakti, Prajnana. But he does not explain it and how it relates to knowledge of God. Perhaps it means knowledge of matter, by which one becomes detached from enjoyment, as instructed in the first verse of this Upanishad. That's just Bhanu Swami explaining that there's something not entirely clear from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary. Okay, that's just sort of skipping and jumping through some of these commentaries on the Upanishads. I guess I'll just conclude by saying I think it's fair to say Srila Prabhupada is, in his other writings and speaking, very much emphasizing verse 1 and verse 15. And at the same time, he is giving us the entire Upanishad because he wants to show this is giving essential teaching about how to realize the supreme personality of Godhead in just a few essential Upanishadic verses. So that's basically what I had in mind to discuss. If you have any further thoughts, I hope I'm serving to some extent the purpose of introducing, leading you into your study of Bhakti Śāstrī, of Isopanisad in Bhakti Śāstrī.
Sure, definitely, Maharaj. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. We can feel the breeze of the Vedic literatures, like Smriti Shastra, coming in after having studied Bhagavad Gita, which might be from the Sanskrit aspect a bit easier to grasp. Smriti Shastra is more in a high Sanskrit. No, it has different taste.
Different tastes, yeah. Different flavors.
Different flavors, yeah.
Yeah, I think it may be helpful also to appreciate, yes, there's this kind of Upanishadic flavor, there's a Puranic flavor, and so on. But the Srimad Bhagavatam in particular, Jiva Goswami explains, is special. One reason is because it gives us three flavors of instruction. It gives us the flavor of the Veda as he uses the word Prabhu, as a master teaching. It gives us the flavor of the Upanishads, the Puranas, as a mitra, as a friend teaching. And it gives us the flavor of kavya, of poetry, which is like the teaching of a beloved, of a very close or intimate associate. He says all three can be found in the Bhagavatam. So we might also say that for Srila Prabhupada, he's giving us the Isopanisad as a preparation for studying the Bhagavatam.
Yes, maybe someone would like to ask some questions on what we have heard.
Everyone's very quiet.
Yes, Erika.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for this explanation. I have one question. I would like to know if there are kind of categories between the Upanishads, because it was mentioned one time Lord Shiva, and I was very surprised. I thought we have knowledge just about the absolute truth. And my question is, if you would like to read other Upanishads, is there a few of them which is mentioned like in goodness, and there are others which better to not read for a devotee? Thank you very much.
Yes, okay. Yes, you could certainly read the Katha Upanishad, I think, and find it in certain ways relishable. And there you'll also see some of the echoes that are, especially when Yamaraj is teaching about this third point, his third question, what happens after death. Then I think you'll find verses like Tadejati, Nainam Chindanti Shastrani, Nainam Dahati Pavaka, Na Chainam Kledayatyapo, Na Shoshayati Maruta, and so on. You'll get verses like that, emphasizing the eternality of the soul. It's also in the Katha Upanishad, you find this famous analogy of the the soul's situation in a body is similar to a person riding a chariot with horses. And so the horses are like the senses, the reins of the horses are the mind, the driver is the intelligence, and the soul is the passenger, and the chariot is the body. That's there in the Katha Upanishad. I'm not myself greatly knowledgeable about different Upanishads, I have to confess. I think there's no harm in exploring, for example, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad it's quite different than what we've just encountered. And it's, as I said, it's speculative. There's the sense that it's sort of trying to get at this mysterious something which is the absolute truth, which is Brahman. And the Upanishads are, in a sense, approaching from different angles. The Prashna Upanishad also, Prashna means question. It's about approaching Brahman, as I remember, through realizing prana. And then there are various analogies given in Upanishads to, you could say, especially if you want to appreciate different ways of understanding the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. After all, in the Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 11, famously, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. These are three different angles, ways of understanding the absolute truth. Jiva Goswami then says, because the word Bhagavan is the last of the three, therefore we have to understand it's superior, or it's inclusive of the others. But it's possible to draw from different Upanishads interesting insights, we might say, about ultimate truth, with the very much emphasis on the sort of I like to say non-personal aspect of the absolute truth. It's not that the non-personal aspect isn't existing. It's there. It's a way of it is a way of understanding ultimate reality, or realizing ultimate reality. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, as you know, in the beginning of chapter 12, he acknowledges this is one way. If you want to, he says it's not going to be easy, but if you want to realize that impersonal reality, you can do it. Klesho dikatarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam. Right? Klesha. It's going to be more difficult, but yeah. Katha Upanishad, I think, is, if you like to say, they're not categorized as mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance, Upanishads, to my knowledge, as the Puranas are. I don't think we can give such labels to them. In one sense, you might say they're all sattva guna, in the sense they're all elevating to, or intending to elevate to Brahman realization. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you so much. May I have another question, please?
Yes.
I started to read the Vedanta Sutra, and actually I find it very interesting and I love it. And I discovered that the prana, which was for me not so much interesting till that moment, is quite often mentioned. And I started to think about that actually in our spiritual practice, we fast, we try to overcome sleeping, and slowly we prepare for the moment of the death to be able to focus. And my question is that actually at the moment of the death, our soul will live on the way of the prana. And my question is related to this, that actually we don't practice to become independent from the air. I don't know how to explain. So anyway, we will be disturbed because of the missing of the air. And is there any possibility to practice also this, to not have this kind of crease that we are not able to breathe? As I read before that, we will start to breathe more rapidly. So, as I understand, at the moment of the death, the prana take a very important part, and I would like to prepare also for that. If you have some kind advices, thank you so much.
Oh, wow, that's quite a question. Well, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to practice of pranayama as a kind of yajna. And he just mentions it. He doesn't give any details. The Hatha yoga tradition or traditions, they give a lot of attention to this. Many, many years ago, I acquired a copy of, what's his name, this famous yogi. He wrote most famously Light on Yoga, and then later another book, Light on Pranayama. And I read the introduction to Light on Pranayama, and as I remember, he was quite straightforward in explaining that if you really want to be successful in the practice of pranayama, you need to practice 4 times a day for 2 hours each time. Once in the morning, once in the midday, once in the evening, and once at midnight. 2 hours each time. And the perfection of pranayama, and that's kind of hinted at in the Bhagavad Gita, as I remember, in chapter 4, is to stop the breath altogether. It says the incoming breath into the outcoming and the outcoming into the incoming. How does that work? And if you think about it physiologically, it's really hard to imagine how that could work, because we understand we need constantly to get oxygen if we don't want to fry out our brains, if nothing else. We need constant, people get a stroke, and the problem is they don't get blood to the head. That means no oxygen. That means they lose often permanently functions of the brain. So how does it work that one is reducing, how does Dhruva Maharaj do it? How does that work? This is, to me, very mysterious indeed. So what does King Kulashekar say or pray? Krishna tvadiya padapankaja panjanantam atyaiva me vishatu manasarajahangsa prana prayana samaye kapavatta pittar kantavarodana vido smaranam kutaste. kutaha, how is it going to be possible for me at that time when my air, the bodily airs are totally disturbed? Therefore, let my mind go now to your lotus feet and become entangled like the swan is entangled in the lotus. Therefore, the emphasis we have been taught is focus on Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that's all I can say about pranayama. I hope that wasn't too discouraging for you.
Sounds much more easy than to wake up during the night for practice pranayama during 2 hours.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I think our time is pretty much up, and I have to meet some people and then hit the road.
Thank you so very much, Maharaj, for taking your valuable time to share your thoughts with us on Śrī Īśopaniṣad. Definitely, we got a good insight, and Devashri Radhika will then continue to teach the 18 mantras of the book in all details to the students.
Very nice, very nice.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Śāstrī course ki jai.
Jai. Krishna Kshetra Maharaj ki jai. Hare
Hare
Krishna. Thank you.
Hare
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna.